Some 20 families of anti-apartheid activists who went missing and were killed are suing the government for 167 million rand in constitutional damages. Now, the families are instituting legal action for the government's role in allegedly preventing the inquiry into and conviction of the alleged torturers and murderers, and of course these perpetrators of their loved ones. Let's discuss the unfinished business of apartheid-era crimes and the lasting effects on the families of victims with clinical psychologist as well as chairperson at the Fort Calata Foundation, Dorothy. Calata, thank you so much for the time, Dorothy. We really appreciate it. You also have a first-hand account with regards to this, of course, with family as part of the Cradock 4. We really appreciate your time as well this morning here on Newzroom Afrika. It's harrowing to continue to live this experience, but knowing that the TRC back in 2003 had a mandate to ultimately give amnesty to some, but there were some that weren't given that amnesty and needed to then be prosecuted or at least investigated at the very least. None of that happening. The NPA has a lot to answer for. How does that sit with yourself and with people in general years on from the incidences having happened?
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers too. You know, that is certainly a very painful position. I think, without a doubt, you know, prior to the TRC coming into place, you know, for me, it looked into a lot of things, but it was preaching primarily and it prioritized reconciliation. I think we should probably, as a country, have sat down and taken all the generals and all the responsible people to a criminal court. You know, that's the first thing that I think we missed there. Then the TRC came and it made these recommendations for people to be prosecuted. However, those prosecutions still did not take place. There were lots of processes. I mean, there's a lot that is written about what happened in between. Today, we are standing at the point where we know certainly from the point of the NPA that there was political interference. And we also know for a fact that, look, more especially the Thabo Mbeki administration, you know, was primarily responsible, I should think, for not having followed up on those recommendations of the TRC. And why am I singling out that administration in particular? It is because our parents, like our mothers, the Cradock 4 widows, the Simelanis, they had to travel overnight to go and try and stop the government, whom Thabo Mbeki at the time tried to give blanket amnesty to the cases, you know, of the TRC and to certain perpetrators. So we are where we are today because of the negligence from our government. I mean, they can call it what they want. They can name it in many different ways, but they are responsible largely for where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, I mean, when one also considers the NPA's role in all of this, because it was the NPA who ultimately also then said that these investigations aren't happening, those prosecutions certainly won't happen, so a lot to answer for Nguga or even Advocate Rodney de Kock as well in that era or in that time to kind of get a word on. How do we move the needle then in this regard? Is taking the government to court at this stage ultimately helping to move the needle? Does it create that investigation to then come to the fore, or does it compensate for something else? If you'd please share and help me with that.
I think the big thing is for us to be able to say we are taking the government to court at this present moment. Like you've just indicated, that there's a lot with regards to the NPA as well. Taking them to court at the moment is going to be able to answer a lot of those unanswered questions. It is very essential that that must be done because certainly there are a lot of talks about transactions which did not come into public, but they were definitely made behind closed doors. And taking government to court now is certainly going to be able to answer to those questions. Secondly, it's also going to make government to be accountable for not having had these prosecutions at the time when they were supposed to. The NPA is just a department within a government sector. We, as the families, recently have had our own experiences with the NPA, and sometimes it gets very, very clear that there's reluctance, within some of the processes. But those are things that we've learned also get imposed upon them. So I think it would be very important for us to be able to have the government to get to be answerable. There is a lot that government has got to come up and take responsibility for, with regards to these cases.
Dorothy.
And also with regards to a lot of impunity.
Yeah, let's talk about just the kind of relief one gets and the psychological aid this may be if you're able to find closure in that form, the kind of closure that is then perhaps needed or wanted by especially the 20 that are taking the government to court, including yourselves?
I think, trauma for me is a wound that gets perpetuated continuously if within the government itself no responsibility gets taken. The families have been traumatized primarily by what has occurred to them, but I think the perpetual trauma then has deepened the wounds of the families. So when now, today, we are standing at the point where we get reminded of the authority that we have as the families to be able to take our government, which is the governing of the country, to have to take responsibility for the trauma which was inflicted upon us, and the trauma which, by the way, was neglected, and the trauma which still remains perpetuated for us as individual families and for the society that we come from. It is a huge, it gives a huge sense of relief to have that little bit of hope, but we know there's going to be resistance with regards to that. But I think any decent human rights respecting government would actually be very happy and grab this opportunity for, the constitutional damages, as an opportunity to rectify the wrongs of the past.
Yeah.
Because this is not done for us as individual members to enjoy, but it is for the process of healing, which I feel primarily it will be to answer to a few members who still have an opportunity for their cases to be heard in a court of law. And secondly, it will also be for people to get healing through memorialization of their members. Because I think one of the things that are perpetuating to the trauma of all of us within these families is the fact that our family members are neglected and disregarded, despite the pain that we have endured as these individuals.
Dorothy, we couldn't appreciate your time more. We certainly wish you the best with regards to all of this as well then. But thank you so much for your time as well then on this weekend morning. Clinical psychologist as well as chairperson then at the Fort Calata Foundation. Dorothy Calata, of course, also with first-hand experience and account then with regards to the matter being taken to court then against government with regards to the Cradock 4 and the apartheid-era atrocities that are being brought forward.